This is First Contact, Stories of the Call Center. Brought to you by NobelBiz, your one-stop shop for all your contact center needs, both carrier and software. Each show, we talk to industry leaders on how they got their start in the call center industry, because let's be honest, it's not a dream job. Hey, everybody. I'm excited to have you all today. We're super excited to have our latest guest on today's podcast. So today we're joined by Tom Laird, one of the most interesting and engaging voices in the industry. I mean, seriously, you can listen to him on his podcast, Advice from a Call Center Geek, a series inspired by his books. If you haven't looked into him, please do so. He's got two. He's got Advice from a Call Center Geek and more advice from a call center geek, because you know what? There wasn't enough advice. So definitely, Tom, you've been a model in leadership. You've been inspiring during these wild times. Obviously, Tom is the CEO of Expevia Interactions Marketing Group, a large call center, large contact center outside of Erie, PA. So for those of you, Pennsylvania, where he's literally managed to move all the hundreds of agents he had remotely during these times, and then even had time to talk about it on his show, which is great. And so if you don't think that's enough, how about this? He's also a professional call center consultant with callcentergeekconsulting.com. So Tom, thanks so much for joining. We're super excited to get this going for you.
Thanks, Christian. That's a heck of an intro. I really appreciate it. I'm excited here too. I love the format of the show. You guys are doing something that's a little bit different and bring a lot of voices and I think things that are not talked about a lot in the call center. So excited to kind of be here today and hopefully add to the format.
Well, we're super excited to have you. And one of the things that the foundation of the show is really to show people that, hey, even though you don't really grow up going, the contact center space is where I'm going to go. This is where I'm going to end up. This is my dream job. Even though it ends up being the dream job for a lot of people, we try to find out, hey, how did you get here? So obviously for you, my understanding is this started at age 9. Now, not everybody starts at age 9. So love to get some insight into how did you even get into this space?
Yeah, literally when you say the call center's in your blood, I think for me, it's probably true. My parents actually started a contact center in the mid 80s. So they started in doing surveys for healthcare, a lot of market research for hospitals. And that evolved into the kind of the credit card boom that was the kind of mid 80s to that mid 90s time when everybody was doing outbound for a lot of financial services. So, in the mid 80s, I was there all the time. And so, I was doing everything from, filling the vending machines in the call center to, my biggest job and the one I would guess I was most proud of is at that time, nothing was automated. It was literally a phone and we had scripts. And we would get these big tapes that came in and there would be pressure sensitive labels on them that you would peel off. And then if you got a sale, you put it on your paper application. So my job was to highlight the time zones. So every time zone had its own color. So that way the rep knew, what time and if they were allowed to call that. Even before TCPA, you still didn't want to call somebody at 6 o'clock in the morning. So that evolved kind of where I came from and really learned, and you soaked all that in. You really didn't have a choice. But again, that was kind of my babysitters were the supervisors and some of the reps that were there during the time. So, just kind of evolved that from, being there for automation, right? Seeing the first computers get put in, seeing things go from picking up a phone and dialing to having a predictive dialer, especially at those times. It was really outbound. Seeing the first inbounds, which were the daisy chains, right? So if this phone was going to ring, then this phone, and if you didn't have somebody sitting here, kind of all that stuff that would kind of come about with that and how you kind of evolve that. So yeah, I mean, I've seen, I think the end of the beginning of the evolution of where we are today, from where that call center was in, that 70s, 80s, kind of almost prehistoric thinking, how we think about it now.
Well, so you literally are one of the few people that I know of that can say, I grew up my whole life in this industry. You can't even say I've just been in it for the last X amount of years. It's like, no, I've been here almost my whole entire life. And since you've seen all that change, obviously you have worked through a variety of roles in the contact center space. So can you walk me through what types of roles have you had? And obviously now that you're the CEO of your own center, what has been your journey from when you were first getting your first job to now when it comes to that? Was it always in the call center space?
Well, I guess now the cool thing is my parents were jerks. Like they made me do everything that, you know, if I wanted to go, if I said, hey, I want to be this, well, then you need to do this, this, and this. So actually I started in college, you know, really when I got into it, in the IT area. So, you know, we just got our first Avaya PBX, right? So we had the Avaya Definity system. So learned that process, had our own predictive dial that kind of tied into that. And so really kind of got involved in the IT side of it there. But I like that, but I like the people part of it. Like I'm a rah-rah high five guy, that kind of. I
don't sense any energy at all.
So, right. So I wanted to be on the floor. So they said, if you want to be a supervisor, you got to go on the phone. So I went on the phones. It was outbound, all credit cards. You know, we were working for, at the time, Mellon Bank, which is now HSBC, Bank of America, Citibank, Chase, and basically calling in footprint or out of footprint for credit cards. And literally it was easy, you know, because nobody really had a credit card or they were just really kind of getting into it. Rates were pretty good at the time. So did that for a while, became a supervisor, and then I ended up running, I was the AM production coordinator, which basically on the inbound and outbound side ran the AM shift, and then became the head of call center operations. So we had about, at the time, about 12 to 1,500 agents. We evolved from 90% outbound to about 90% inbound, you know, through the 2000s. Kind of, yeah, as that evolved, because now everybody who had credit cards, people needed to service those credit cards.
Yeah.
So the service industry with that kind of exploded as well. So yeah, I mean, we can get into kind of how Expevia happened, but that's kind of how, you know, where at least I evolved. I had a couple, you know, little side jobs and things outside of the industry, but for the most part, since really I was 18, you know, not at 9, you know, I was hanging out, but I didn't end up working in the industry and kind of learning it as I was kind of going through school, and then really kind of learning the nuances of the leadership roles and those types of things as well.
So at what point did you go, all right, Expevia needs to exist, right? Was that always something that was in your mind and it was an end goal and you've now come to it? Or at some point this thing just said, hey, this company needs to exist and I need to run it?
No way. No. My plan was to take over my parents' organization, right? So we were doing really well, but again, we were working for all financial services organizations. So literally, you know, like I said, Bank of America, Citibank, Chase, GE Capital, HSBC, Regions Bank. So we had some smaller banks, some larger, a lot of the Fortune 500s and Fortune 50 banks. And in 2008, 2009, 2010, that went from being in one of the best channels to the worst. So, you know, for example, for one of the organizations, one of the largest banks, we were doing like 28,000 hours of inbound a month.
Wow.
Literally the next month they went to 3,000 hours. Next month they went to 1,500. Couldn't do that according to the contract, but basically they said, sue us. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
So we had some private equity guys that came in because we went from a thriving organization to, you know, employing about 150 people in literally about a 6-month time span. So they said, hey, listen, we're going to get you through this, you know, this, everybody called it the Great Recession, but turned into the Great Depression for us.
Yeah.
So these guys came in, and the next thing you know, a couple months later, they fired everybody. So all the leadership roles, programmers, client services, HR, obviously me in the production role and a lot of my team. So I didn't know what to do. You know, I knew this is really all I did. So I said, you know, I initially went and said, you know, maybe I can go look for a job in another call center or kind of doing something like that. But I don't know. I thought we could do something cool. I thought I had some really good ideas that now that I wasn't, you know, enamored or belabored with some legacy type systems, the cloud was really just now starting to come into play.
Yeah.
Oh, we all had lunch and said, guys, what do you want to do? And I had 60% say, hey, well, I'm going to do something else. About 20% say, hey, if you do something, I'll come. And then, you know, we had like whatever that 20%, I hope my math is right, that said, hey, I'm in. So went out and we found investors, which is the worst possible thing to do. Hardest thing I've ever done. Well, up to that point. But anyway, we did. And we found a couple investors that believed in us. We started Expevia in like 2010 with four employees. And now we've grown it to about a 5 going on 600 seat organization here about, I don't know, 8 or 9 years later. So I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot of things that I would never, ever, ever want to do again. Like Christian, if you said, hey, Tom, I got $5 million, let's go start a company, I'd say, Christian, I'm in. If you said, Tom, hey, I got nothing, but I got an idea, I'd say, Christian, see ya. So, from a bootstrapping standpoint and from the making the payroll and the call center stuff was easy for me, right? It was the evolution into the business side that really, kind of was an eye-opening experience. It's something that I've evolved and I've gotten, I think, pretty good at now. But yeah, it's been an interesting road.
Well, I think that journey, though, has definitely made you learn things, and you've imparted that learning process into everything you do, right? And into the way you lead. And one of the things that I really have just been curious, and I hate to put you in the spot here if there's not a big thing behind it, but I've always wondered, how'd you come up with Expevia? Is there something behind the name, or was it just kind of like, this sounds cool?
No, when we were leaving the other organization, the Expevia was going to be the kind of the IT side where they were going to try to make that kind of a profit center, right? So we were going to try to do some websites and development, that type of thing. So I didn't get any severance or anything. So basically just said, hey, can I have that name? It's registered. I'm thinking in my mind, if I do something, I don't have to pay for it. I don't really have that much money to do that. So they said, yeah, basically just take it. So I don't know, for me, Expevia kind of became like the Phoenix, right? Like this thing that is with us that came from that other place that wasn't so good, but then evolved into something that's been pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, I think that's why we kind of stuck with the name. It's kind of hard to say. I get Expevia, right? Expevia, like what is it? So in hindsight, maybe not the best, but I think it's kind of like our little mascot that I think has a little bit more meaning for those of us who came from the other place.
Well, awesome. And to really know that you took something that was lost and gone and made it into something, great. I think that's a great story behind that. And obviously it's a testament to you not giving up and saying, hey, well, I want to do something. And that something became probably better than what it was before, because obviously technology and all these other things that you wanted to impart. But all that information, that stuff that you've learned over this time, it seems like you really like to share it, and obviously enough so the 2 books came out of it, right? So how did that come about? You just said one day, I'm going to write a book, and then next thing you know, I'm like, oh, this is so great, I'm going to write another one.
We talked, and when I say the marketing team, it's basically at the time, it was basically me and some other people who liked to do marketing, right? We couldn't afford to have a marketing person. We said, guys, how can we market ourselves? How can we brand ourselves? How can we get our name out? We can't do a ton of AdWords spend. We can't do social spend at this time. What can we do? So we said, let's give everything away that we possibly can. Let's try to impart as much value into the industry and become known that way. So it was kind of like our guerrilla warfare. That's how it started, our guerrilla warfare marketing.
Gotcha.
So we were just hammering out blog posts at the time. That evolved into videos, that evolved into kind of a YouTube channel, that evolved into our blog posts and our blog site. And then we had all this content, and we said, all right, I don't want to make a ton of money off this book, but another way that I think we can market the organization is by writing a book that I think could add a ton of value on how we see the call center should be run, some different ways that we do things. There's so much, there's podcasts out there, and there's blog posts, and there's things that talk about the theory of customer service and the theory of customer support. And here's some tactics and things you can do, but nothing really got underneath the hood and said, listen, if I want to run a call center, what are some things I need to do? What are the technologies I need? What are some of the skills and the talent? How do I handle an associate? So we wanted to get into like the nuts and bolts of actually doing it for somebody who's starting, or somebody who, there's so many people, like you said, Christian, that they didn't start in the call center. They just get put into a role of, all right, hey, I got 50 people, and what do I do? Right? I know how to manage people, but the call center side is so much different. So we basically, cheated, I guess. And we took all those blog posts and we whiteboarded all of them, and then we added and evolved them into something that I think could be a kind of a chapter by chapter how to run a contact center or at least to evolve your thinking into some of the things that you're doing now from a culture standpoint, from an operational standpoint, those types of things. And I think there's not a lot of help out there for it. When you really talk about, I have this type of situation, what do I actually do? And hopefully that book can kind of really give you some, this is what you can do. This is what we've done. I don't know if it's good or not, but this is kind of how we would have handled that situation.
Well, that's awesome. And I know for those of you, like I said earlier, who haven't seen the 2 books, you should definitely look into them. And just curious, is there a third ever going to come out or another?
Well, what we're working on now is and it's kind of slowed down because of this work from home. And I don't know how much, I think it's still going to add a lot of value, but we're trying to do 101 games to play in your call center. That has been like the number one blog post that we have on our site. Everybody's always looking for call center games. They're looking for rep engagement. How do we make our call center fun? So we're trying to kind of just tag on to that with what people are wanting. And we have this, we have about 150 games that we have here at Expevia that we play at all times. Wow. To put those into a context, right, of a book with pictures and with things, it's been a little bit of an undertaking to make sure that people understand it. But I think it'll be pretty cool when it's out. And now we're trying to think of how do we add some work from home stuff too, because this whole thing is totally shifted to that standpoint. Now we might see some of that come back, but I think the at home is going to be a huge piece of what's going on.
So obviously that transition, we've mentioned the podcast as well, and you have a podcast that's been going on now regularly, on a regular basis. There's always content, a lot of really great content going on there. Was that, again, as an extension of the other stuff you were doing? And when you did that, you're just like, all right, I'm going to keep going with the podcast, and then the content from there kind of feeds these other things. Like, how did that just become part of the whole mix with everything you're doing?
There was nothing out there. And there was a space for sure that I thought could be filled. Again, there was people that talk about customer service and customer support and maybe how you should talk to a customer and these theory type things, but there was nothing that was hardcore call center operations. So we wanted to, again, evolve the book. And then it basically is, the book's great, but things are constantly changing. So with the podcast, we're able to kind of say, hey, last week the new regulations came out on this, TCPA regulation or anything that kind of comes out that's new or that the technology that's evolving, we can kind of stay up with it as well. So the podcast started as, the first episode was done. It was like Christmas Day. My kids were done opening their presents. They're playing. I went downstairs with it's actually the same mic I have here and just like talked about something. So that thing has really evolved as well too. And I think it's turned into a labor of love in something that's been a lot of fun to do and something that I'm just shocked at the following that it has. And now you're starting to see a lot of other people kind of do the same thing, which I think is kind of cool too, because there's a lot of voices that can be heard. There's a lot of really talented people, a lot of really, really good colleagues that are out there, like even like you guys that can kind of talk about the same thing with different nuances, with different expertise.
Yeah, and I think when you have a lot of great leadership around, the ideas that just come up when you have leaders talking to one another or talking about what they do, it's incredible the kind of stuff that can come from it. And obviously the end outcome is always having great outcomes for your customers, right? That's always the ultimate goal, is that the outcomes you get from them, the experiences you provide them are exceptional and memorable. So I know for you specifically, you've mentioned on many occasions that, call center agents are like heroes, right? They're the ones that are picking up the phones for when you need your stimulus check, when you need an emergency call, things related to coronavirus, or anything that's happening that you need daily. So from that perspective, what kind of things, what advice would you give to call center agents in the positions where right now they're maybe working in the center and they can't work remote? They're not like everybody else who just goes like, hey, you get to go home. What is it that you would say or that you do say to agents in those positions?
Yeah, they're the voice of help, right? They're the only voice for that brand. If there's a product that someone desperately needs now, a lot of people can't get out. So they're ordering things online. If they don't have that product, they don't have that medicine, they don't have something, there's a huge need, and it's a pretty cool thing to be able to help. One of the really unique things that we have been able to do that I think speaks really well to this is when Corona kind of blew up, LA County's 211 kind of reached out, and we were able to be, and we still are, kind of one of the support sites for 211. So basically, it's everything from, hey, I'm sick right now. Is there a site that I can get tested on? Or, hey, I'm homeless right now. Where can I get some help? Or where can I get tested? Those types of things. And it really opened the eyes to a lot of our associates who have worked on customer service programs for brands and for companies and for organizations. But when you take a kind of a consumer helpline, right, to that level, they really saw the impact that they were having. We'd had reps crying in a good way, because some of the things that have been said and how they were just kind of getting applauded by the person on the other line, that how much they were helping. So you're right. I mean, the call center industry sometimes, and the reps sometimes, get a really bad rap. But when it boils down to it, the support and the help that they're giving, especially during this time, it's kind of unprecedented, and it is pretty awesome.
So it's incredible when you think about it, that all of these things, when everyone's forced to have to go remote, or you're in a position where you can't go anywhere, you're stuck in the specific places you're at, and it's maybe not conducive to you being safe or feeling safe, or that feeling of being able to be productive. So you as a leader, there's culturally certain things that every brand and every company has. I know you talk a lot about attitude and effort, right? And you talk about how that's really important. How does that drive, or has that been able to be a driver during this pandemic? Has that been useful or helpful for the staff and the people you've worked with in being able to achieve things during this difficult time?
Yeah, I think it's a weapon for us. I mean, I don't know if that's the right word for it, but it's definitely an advantage for us. And I think for anybody, like if you have a defined culture, right, and you can kind of stick to those pillars, even when the wind starts blowing, the associates kind of know where you're coming from with certain things, right? They're not kind of just taken like, why are we doing this? So, we say our culture is a sunshine attitude with an entrepreneurial mindset. All boils down to attitude and effort. So we try to hire, incent, promote off of those pillars. So the cool thing is, with attitude, it's really, for us at home, it's, your occupancy, actually just coming in and making sure that you're logged in on time, those types of things. And then, when we talk about, the flip side of it, we're big into analytics. So our sentiment reporting, those types of things, like we're actually paying our reps off of sentiment, right? So we can tell a client, I guarantee that we're being nice to you guys, like your customers, we're saying the right things, our tone is proper because our sentiment scores are 90% or 80% or 85%. So those types of things, which is really cool. And that's another thing about being in the cloud that's great, right? Because a lot of what you did here, you can bring it to the at-home, right? A lot of those same techniques you can. So while you can't, high five and walk down and do that to a rep, you can do some things from an instant messaging, from a video that kind of is the same thing. But as long as we have those two pillars of attitude and effort, I think that we're able to do things that the reps kind of understand, and they can kind of correlate really well with.
Well, that's great. And I think one of the things that when we talk about that, when we transition to you as a leader, right, being the tip of the spear for your business for a lot of these things, are there things that you're still learning, or you feel that you're struggling with from a leadership standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think even as an organization, we are still not great. And I guess I'll get to me in a second, but as an organization, we're still not great at the training. The virtual training, we've tried a couple different aspects. I think we're good at it. We're not where I want us to be. We're still doing a lot of training here on site in smaller groups. The cool thing is I have 30,000 square foot of call center space with nobody in it. So if we want to do a class of 15 reps, we can socially distance pretty well.
Yeah, I don't think space is an issue.
Right, anymore, or at least right now. So we've been doing that, and then I think it's been very difficult to impart our culture on new reps when they go right home, right? So they don't see how we operate, how we talk to each other, the camaraderie that happens in the center. That's been a challenge for us from a work from home standpoint, is to really, how do we differentiate, and how do we put that Expevia brand on these reps on these new employees when, they're just kind of going right home and they're not interacting. So that kind of stuff has been made us really think some of the ways that we operate through a little bit. For me personally, I think as we've grown, I was always very hands-on. And I have really good people in a lot of really good roles, and I'm still doing certain things I shouldn't be doing, like that they can be doing.
So delegating.
I think I need to define my role a little bit now that we've grown into this kind of really cool organization that, I shouldn't be, filling out, like I'm still doing like RFPs and like things like that. When the people are like, oh, I already did all this stuff. I'm like, all right, yeah, you're right. Stuff that I guess I was used to when we were smaller because you had to do everything. So things like that, what is the CEO role for me? So those kind of things I'm still kind of working through, but I guess it's gone pretty well.
Well, being self-aware is definitely one key thing that needs to be addressed. And if you're aware of those kinds of things, and obviously there are things that you can do. And trust me, I've been in that position before as well. Is sometimes you're a perfectionist, you want to get it done. You're in the mix of it. You really enjoy it, maybe. And
right.
And
I think that's what it is too, Christian. Like a lot of stuff I like to do, but I shouldn't do. Right?
No, definitely. And I mean, when you think about that though, there's always that saying, right? You love what you do, you never work a day in your life. But look, being a contact center, call center agent is not easy. Right. It's a position in which you're constantly potentially talking to people that aren't happy, right? You're potentially in a position where you're actually not given a lot of ability to make a lot of decisions on your own. So you have a limited decision-making ability, but then you also have potentially a lot of people that aren't happy, which is a pretty stressful position, which in turn, among other things, there's a lot of high turnover. So what is it that you, outside of potentially making the environment fun, would you say that a contact center needs to do to be able to manage turnover? Is that just a reality and it kind of is what it is?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that there always is kind of the nature of people thinking that this is a job for college kids, right? A job that it's kind of my first job and I'll evolve into it. And that's okay. I think the biggest thing that most call centers do not do, and I'll go back to what I just kind of said a couple minutes ago, is define your culture and then hire off that culture, right? So many organizations are in call centers, they get a resume and they say, wow, this is a really good rep. They worked at 2 other contact centers. They've worked in the industry for 25 years. They must be, it's probably an older rep, man, or I don't know, 25 years, it's a long time, but that might not fit what we're looking to do, right? They might not fit, the type of program, the type of client, the type of organization that we are. So, that's a huge piece of it. And the second thing is attendance is always an issue. So, one of the things that we're doing from an attitude standpoint that I think, and I wrote a big blog on this too, and I think it's super helpful. We've raised our attendance by about 33%, is we're paying our reps, right? So they get a base rate, and then we call it, they go on a streak. So every single week that they work 100% of their schedule, right, they make another $1, right? And then so we can get up to like $4 or $5 extra depending on your program. We're not doing any more work, right? Not having better stats or better occupancy, literally just showing up, just coming to work. And then that builds. So, an associate knows if I come to work at Expevia, I get a chance to make a lot of money relative to any other call center in the area, based on that. So we're trying again to incent the things that are important instead of just saying, hey, you get a base rate, and then if you have a couple sales, you're going to get this. Right? To look more holistically at the associate and say a better associate is somebody that's here, right? Those things are going to take care of itself. How do we get that associate here? And then I think that helps a lot with your turnover. And when associates see that you're really trying to put the effort towards getting them more money or certain things like that, I think it does help. The other thing is your culture of fun. Like the call center is a difficult place. You should have a game. We have a game going on, or at least we did. When everybody was here, we're still working through some of that stuff, but when everybody was here, we had a game on every single team, right? Whether it was team versus team, individuals versus individuals, we were doing something with one of our games to try to make things as much fun as you possibly can. Because again, you can get beat up all day long sometimes, depending on the program you are. So to have some of those things in place, I think makes a big deal.
Definitely. And I mean, obviously, if you incent the right behaviors, then it drives those outcomes, and that kind of just self-manifests, which is great. And so let's kind of jump to another topic in a parallel way here, though, is let's talk about, soft skills, right? I mean, can someone actually succeed without having a strength in the soft skill area?
Well, the thing that we're finding is almost nobody has it, or very few of them have it, right? So everybody's in a texting world now. So very few, especially if you are in that millennial, if you're in that 20s and even, getting into the 30s, are really interacting like you and I, and this is probably even weird, right? But like face to face, everybody's texting, everybody's using different types of languages, right? With how they interact. They talk to their friends differently than you can talk to a customer. So it's really, really important in that onboarding training and your ongoing training that you're constantly working on that. So, one of the things that we do is we have an hour of weekly education that we don't bill the clients, but every single program, they just go and basically, we don't talk about any of the, hey, your monitoring report, and we do that in a different area, but we're not talking about monitoring or quality, but we're just, we're talking about those type of soft skills, how you're going to talk to each other. If a client or if a customer calls in and they say this, what are some of the things that you can rebut or come back with that are the proper tone? So a lot of it is we're seeing as well. It's not really what you say. We say the tone is the message, right? It's kind of how they say it, right? And the rep will be like, what do you mean? I said exactly what you want to say. Well, you did. But that tone that you had is something else that goes along with that kind of that soft skill. So it's an industry issue because of just how society is right now. And it's not wrong. It's just kind of where we are and what needs to be trained depending on the program. Let me just add this too, Christian, is for us, the really cool thing about being a BPO is we have a lot of different clients with a lot of different cultures, right?
Yeah.
So we have some like tech startups that we can be like, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? Like you can talk like that on the phone, right? And we have other financial services as, hey, ma'am, thank you for calling. This is blah, that you're very formal. So that's another thing to kind of, I think that makes us a little bit better with that because we have so many different ways that we have to communicate that you kind of get good at it depending on what the client is really looking for.
Well, obviously you're going to have those reps that can do multiple ones really well. And then you have some that are actually just really good at one or the other. So it does give you some variety to work in there. So it sounds like definitely soft skills is something you focus on, you teach on it. It's something that's not inherently common with a lot of the reps out the gate, but it's something you're constantly working. And it sounds like you have a program that focuses on it. It's just not like a one and done. It's like, I did it on everyone's learning.
Right.
You have to constantly be reinforcing that. So you would say that, yeah, absolutely, you can teach it for those that may not have it, or you can teach it well enough that if you have a program in place that does some front end and then maintenance ongoing, that it absolutely can be done enough to make a positive improvement in the experience.
Yeah, and I think the technology that we have now helps with that too, right? So with sentiment reporting, with analytics, those types of things, we can really look at tone and be able to have reps now. Obviously, that's part of everybody's QA when they're doing QA monitoring and quality assurance. But now with some of the tools as well that we have from that standpoint, I think it's made things better where you're being more proactive in catching it.
Mm-hmm.
But then before, when we were just trying to listen and catching that needle in the haystack with what an associate's doing.
Definitely. So, as we've talked about, the form that a lot of people are communicating, everything from Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, SMS, Twitter, all these other social mediums, or even in their handheld devices. When it comes to the discussion starting to migrate there more obviously than it was from an adoption standpoint, but also it's getting better at versus what it was, and you're getting a more true omni-channel experience versus just multi-channel interactions before. In that world, though, what advice, though, would you give to businesses that are looking to implement this more text type-oriented communication versus voice?
I think it's a no-brainer. And the cost, as you guys know too, it's not much more, right? I think there's a lot of laziness and a lot of complacency of this is kind of how we've done it. We've seen a lot of, even on the flip side, right? We've seen a lot of, organizations that start and all they do is text or they do is email and evolve them to voice, right? Yeah. It's like this double evolution. And then these legacy organizations that have been around have just done voice, and now they're starting to get into the digital, into the texting, into the chat. So as you said, any organization that you go with from an outsourcing standpoint or any software that you get, you have to be able to give customers the option now. There's I think the days of, hey, this is how we do customer service and this is the channels that we're going to offer. It's just because people are nervous or scared or they've never done it. But again, we just talked about how the reps, we're struggling with soft skills. One thing they're really good at is typing and texting in chat. So we have found that, a lot of those guys, right, they're really good at it. They're really fast at it. They can work 6 or 7 different chats at one time because that's kind of how their brain has kind of been programmed through the technology that everybody's been using. So if those reps are starting to get really good at it, that means your customers are starting to get really good at it, and that's becoming more of a preferred channel. Voice is still king, and we still see it, but chat is right there. And then the last thing I want to say with this too, because I can go on this topic because it kind of gets me fired up, is people talk about the chat bots, right? And they talk about AI and kind of where we are from an AI standpoint. And I still think that the human chat is just so much better than where we are from a chatbot standpoint, from where we are from I think it's really cool to have a nice self-service model, but so many people want to use that as their model instead of just the add-on. So from that standpoint, if you have that voice, if you have chat that's starting to evolve, email is still a really big channel that we're starting to see. It's really in every RFP, which kind of surprises me, but anything from that digital technical channel is really starting to go. And as you just said too, from Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, we're seeing really an evolution and a blow up of service of that, especially the newer companies. They're really coming on board, and that might be their only service channel. So yeah, it's a big change that's happening since, in the last probably 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And I mean, look, just me as a consumer, and especially through this pandemic, brands that I had great experiences with. I mean, it was like, yeah, every single time I call, every time I email, if I get a website, it's like that, and I'm good. And through this pandemic, someone went down the drain. I mean, there's horrible services where I'm just going, man, this experience is, you can't explain it other than a bad experience, right?
Right.
But there's other brands that I've interacted with that I never have, and ones that I did before and I still do today, where the experience was phenomenal. And I'm going, wow, these brands really stepped it up. And even through other mediums that maybe I didn't use in the past. And so it's interesting to see that when we talk about the AI and you talk about how there's people that think like tomorrow, all agents are going to get replaced, right? And AI is going to be the everything. And I think you've done a great job of articulating that. Well, I think it's them working together. It's not just an either or, right? So kind of walk me through a little bit what you mean by that. And then I'd love to kind of give an anecdote of something I just experienced yesterday on this.
So when you talk to anybody who right now is an AI guru, right? Or you go on LinkedIn and they say, hey, our reps can do this. I've never seen it. I mean, I'm in the consulting side too. I'm not naive enough to say it's not going to be there someday, because I think it's probably going to be, right? But at this point, there is nothing out there that can really just call in and be like, hey, how you doing? Have a human being voice all their issues, ask a ton of questions that an AI or some type of bot or some type of voice IVR from an AI standpoint can handle. Now, that doesn't mean AI is not useful. So what we're starting to see and what we're starting to utilize on our call center is real-time transcription from Google. Mm-hmm. Basically, associate, and then it's kind of their AI buddy, right, is right here. Customer is talking, and the AI buddy is just transcribing all the words, and then giving the rep kind of pushing them to say, hey, this customer likes this. This is probably a good upsell for them. This is probably a good cross-sell for them. Here's a PDF that you're going to want because they're going to ask this question next. So the AI is starting to evolve to listen to the customer, start to associate and help that associate kind of make that customer journey a little bit better. That's where I see in the next 12 to 18 months, that's where AI really is going to have a huge impact. Also, just on the advanced routing and workforce intelligence, when certain calls are starting to queue to have AI, really bring in reps from different skills, have them pull out, know what reps to bring in because they have the shortest handle time, the best occupancy, those types of things. That takes a little bit of the human intervention away from it. So, that I think everybody got so enamored with that Google developers conference when it was like they were calling and scheduling an appointment for a hair salon, right?
Yeah.
That's what everything's going to be, and it's not, and it's not even close yet. Again, I'm all in on AI. Like we are seeing what's next, but what from an ROI standpoint really makes sense for us, and what will really help the customer, and not kind of take us down this road of that's not really going to work yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's still very bleeding edge right now. It's right there where it exists. It's just not ready for prime time across the replacement of what people think it would do. But to get to my experience yesterday, I was talking with a major brand or trying to get in touch with a major brand, and they made modifications where they've kind of hidden their phone number to be able to communicate with them, right? So the only thing I can do is send them an email or try to open a web chat. Well, through that web chat, there's this AI behind the scenes trying to communicate with me. It's trying to look up my information. It's trying to guess why I'm reaching out to them. And it takes a while to finally get to a human being that I can just ask the questions the way in my mind I'm thinking I need to get solved. And then all of a sudden it gets solved. Now, obviously, that's a very basic way to explain why it didn't work for me in that scenario. But had my transaction needed something that was purely that black and white, then sure, yeah, it could have really worked. But in that instance, for me as a consumer, the friction that was causing me to have to hunt down a number, couldn't find a number, had to find an email. You knew it was going to take forever to get a response. You went through web chat, which wasn't super easy to find. And then you had to get through their bot for a while and all the things they wanted to guess or assume. So you're right. It's not there yet, but what it can do today, definitely there's some really cool stuff. And so let's kind of shift.
Christian, not to interrupt you, but what you said something that I think was awesome, and the AI bot guessed, right? So it didn't just say, hey, this is my issue, where a human being can just kind of take that. Your frustration came because that's kind of where it is right now, right? And sometimes if it's like you said, if it's black and white, self-service is great. If I want to get my account balance, I want to do something really quick, great. I don't need to talk to anybody. But for most things, you're right. It's guessing and not really helping.
Absolutely. So it'll be great to see the day when that becomes a little bit more refined, but I still think there's still going to have to be that human connection, that human interaction at certain levels of touch.
Right. Especially for high-end interactions. Those types of things I don't think are going away. And we can get into a whole conversation then about offshore and that kind of stuff with that. But yeah, I think that all kind of plays into it.
Absolutely. So kind of let's shift to obviously the big topic right now, right? Everyone's talking about how the pandemic is affecting things, right? When you had to make a change to what does it look like in the future, right? So from that perspective, when we look at that, I know you said, hey, the coronavirus represents the glory day of the call center. I mean, you might be perfectly right there, but with what's going on, how can right now people get the outcomes they're looking for and the things that you want to be able to see in the industry? I know people have had to be forced to make decisions because of the pandemic. What have you seen, and what things, maybe were easy and common for you that wasn't a big transition because of the pandemic?
Never in the history of kind of the contact center industry has technology played a bigger role in what has happened in the last 4 to 5 months. And basically it was black or white. You either had something or you didn't have it. You were either okay, right? Or you were in big trouble. So anybody who got caught with the premise-based legacy type systems that bought because they were secure and, this is kind of how we do things. Well, they got really hurt, and they got hurt really bad with figuring out, oh my gosh, how do we do this at home thing? And then you had some really nimble organizations, which, a lot of BPOs are now, and especially on the US side, that were able to transition very quickly. So, one of the coolest things we did, I think, from a social media standpoint is we actually, if you go even, I think they're on my LinkedIn, or we actually filmed our meetings, right? Like our live meetings when this was all going down, and said, all right, guys, we have 500 agents here. We have literally this week to get them home. How are we going to do this? And IT, and we basically, took about a day and said, this really shouldn't be that bad. Set up a couple VPNs for a couple different clients, but for the most part, being in the cloud, a rep theoretically could be at Starbucks, right? And as long as there's internet, they could be taking calls. So the transition for us, luckily, wasn't so much on the technology side, right? It was more, how do we operate now? How do we operate with Slack? How do we communicate to reps? What are the procedures now that we need to do to start a shift to make sure reps are doing what they're supposed to be doing? How do we give them feedback? Those types of things, they're part of our disaster recovery plan, right? But we've never really had to dust it off. So we always knew, hey, we were going to do at-home agents, we're going to do this. But when everything really came down to it, we had to really put things in place very quickly. So it's made us much stronger. It's made a lot of organizations a lot stronger. We are now, I was an totally against at home, coming from the financial services side, from PCI compliance, from security. I couldn't figure out how I could wrap my head around having that, because a rep could be doing a great job, but maybe the roommate, right, who's coming behind them takes a picture, does something like that. So we came up with some security protocols that I was very happy with. And now I think we're going to be hybrid, right? I think that all of the financial services clients that we have, HIPAA, that type of information, we're going to bring back brick and mortar, but probably 40 to 50% of my clients are okay with it. We will probably end up leaving reps at home long term. So it's really evolved. If that's evolved my little piece of the world, right, from a call center side, it's really, it's done ripples across the entire industry. So it's really put a lot of stress on organizations, again, that weren't in the cloud. And now, third, fourth quarter, first quarter, there's going to be a lot of people looking to say, hey, do I outsource? Do I go buy some cloud type of telephony platform? What do we do? Because we can't get caught like this again, because a lot of people did.
Absolutely. And I think with that stress and in that movie, I'd love to kind of just tap for just a little bit is, what do you feel that you're most proud of, or things when it comes to your employees through this transition that helped them through this difficulty? Obviously, there's a lot of people that even though they went home, there may have been 3 to 5 or 15 other people in that room, and they may not have an office. They may not have had proper internet or a computer, whatever it may be. It's stressful financially for people, right? There's all kinds of things. Was there anything in particular that you and the company did for your staff or employees to help them through this time, or to help them in any way, shape, or form that you're proud of?
Yeah, I mean, we've done, first thing is like that multiplier that I talked about, or that streak, we talked about from an attendance standpoint. We just kind of allowed that to happen, right? So we knew that there's going to be some people that are kind of figuring things out. Maybe they're going to be a half hour late because their computer's down, those types of things, which it doesn't sound like a big deal, but that was kind of a big deal for those guys, because a lot of people are, they count on that. And they do a really good job of always being here. So this was kind of like some water in their face, like, oh my gosh, maybe something's not going to get done right. We gave all of our reps the computer. So we're currently, we actually put them in a box, give them a headset, give them a computer, give them all their equipment. I don't know if that will continue that way, but that's what we did very quickly. If there was any reps that did not have internet, we helped facilitate that. We were also allowed to be open as a business that could stay open because of the 211. So if we did have any reps that, wanted to work or didn't have internet or just couldn't get internet, we actually had a couple reps, not too many, that we brought back and kind of spaced them out here so that they wouldn't lose any time. We did not have to lay anybody off. We actually have grown, throughout kind of this pandemic, and it's kind of hard for me to talk about because you don't want to be happy about it. But I just kind of say it's kind of a lot of the call center guys it's kind of right place at the wrong time, right? It's a need that a lot of people have had, and they need to hear that voice. So from that standpoint, it's been really cool to be able to help. And I think that we've tried to instill that in the associates as well with really the cool thing about, I guess, everybody at home and everybody on Slack is that while before I could, walk through the room and high five or talk, but now literally I can communicate better with everyone, right? There's an all company Slack channel now that we didn't have when everybody was here, that I'm, constantly trying to give updates or, hey, thank yous. And then going into each specific team and kind of hearing from me or hearing from the leadership team a little bit more was something that you didn't think about. But one of the really kind of cool things that kind of happened with that. So I think our communication culture got a lot better as well. And I have a lot of reps talking to me back and forth now, right? So it's kind of cool where before we like knock on the door, maybe like be scared to put their head in. Now everybody's kind of really talking and communicating and hey, I have this issue, or hey, this has gone really well. So I think from that standpoint, it's made us a little bit stronger, and the reps have done just an awesome job.
Well, that's incredible. And I mean, I'd love to finish this off by shifting to a little bit about you, Tom. So, I mean, you've had a long day at work. You've been at the office. What do you do to unwind? What do you do when you get home to kind of let go? Anything?
I got two little guys at home. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Okay.
It's the 7-year-old girl and a little 5-year-old son. So the 5-year-old he's into the video games now. He's into baseball. So he's like, Dad, let's go hit bombs. Right. So we go in the backyard and kind of do that. But for the most part, I coach high school basketball here in town as well. So that kind of keeps me out of trouble. So we've been kind of trying to evolve and kind of figure that out too with everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those are kind of my family, my wife, the 2 kids, and then, with basketball, it kind of keeps me out of trouble and
Well, that's incredible. And obviously for the quarantine itself, how was that for you and the family? Has everyone been able to kind of work through it and be able to deal with all the isolation?
Yeah, I think it's been harder on my wife, to be honest. I mean, it is difficult, especially, all the working moms or working dads that you have 2 or 3 kids that are at home, you're trying to homeschool. And, we kind of think that through with our reps too, right? It's great to say, hey, I work from home, but when you work from home and everyone else is home too, it can be a way more stressful environment than it is, being here in the office. So I kind of lazy or I don't know, cheaped out, and I came into work every day. So, I don't know if that helped her or hurt her. So nobody was really here. There was about 3 of us here. So kind of I worked from here and did what I had to do there. But then I would go home a little bit if the kids were kind of, at it. But, everybody's kind of dealing with that. And it's crazy how things evolved so quickly. But nobody really even had time to plan for any of this. It just literally was, a couple weeks and you had to kind of figure it out. So pretty proud of the family, pretty proud of the organization with how we've kind of evolved through this. It was a kind of a harrowing time that I think we've kind of gotten through and definitely became stronger as a family and I think as an organization as well.
Well, I really appreciate you joining today. Thanks so much, Tom. Obviously, we had a great time. At least I did. Hopefully it was for you.
Yeah, good time.
And obviously for the audience, I'm open as well. But, for all of those who want to be able to follow you, connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. Check me out there. And then I just want to throw this out too. We just started a Advice from a Call Center Geek texting community. So if anybody wants to kind of join that, if you just text hello to 814-247-0366, literally that comes directly to me. That's one of my phone numbers. I will see your text. If you have any issues, questions, I will be able to help. There's no cost. And then also we're going to give some just more content, never any selling, any sales, just some call center, contact center operations content there as well. So yeah, best thing is if you want, check me out on LinkedIn or check out the texting community.
Perfect. And obviously you got your podcast, you got your consulting business, you got the books. I think there's definitely plenty of areas and places where people are going to get some great stuff. So again, thanks so much for stopping by. Everyone, thanks so much for listening. Obviously see you next episode. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Christian.
All right.
Thanks for listening to First Contact Stories of the Call Center. My name is Christian Montes, and we'll be back soon with our next episode. This podcast has been hosted by me, Christian Montes, produced, written, and edited by Bogdan Minuts, with co-executive producers Steve Biederman, Lauren Chasson, Christian Montes, Joanne Sabo, and Bogdan Minuts.